So, hello there again, all you wonderful people. Just woken up in the hospital and been out for a quick smoke, had a cup of tea and a cup of coffee, and I saw this video from the guy who made The Revolution Won't Be Televised, or Will Be Televised, whatever it was called, that comedy show, like Jolyon Rubinstein or something, I think his name is. Like, he's been, like most people, kind of flooding the newsfeed with kind of posts about what's going on in Gaza. I've been doing the same. Like, I scroll through Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and I'm sort of torn between this kind of sharing every single one and reducing the sort of catchment to anybody that might look at my social media pages, which don't get really very much attention anyway. It seems a little bit kind of hopeless. And like, I don't share every single one. And every time you do scroll past and you see on Twitter, it says, please don't scroll past, please help us, you know. And it's like, is it insensitive or selfish intentionally to be on social media talking about anything other than the crisis in Gaza at the moment? People banging on pots and pans outside Westminster, like a bit like my Facebook's in professional mode now, and like I uploaded a selfie the other day and it said it had 5 views. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, that's about as much impact as you have as one person at a march outside Downing Street. You know, if they continue to just march outside Downing Street every single day, you might argue it's going to put some political pressure on, but only from a PR perspective. It's not going to change their diplomatic ties or the way they do things. And it's like the people who, I've seen a lot of people who are really sort of righteously indignated about it being complicit to stay silent, you know, and that, you know, if you, like, I was going to get a coffee in town yesterday, and if I had bought a coffee, I was going to sell a hard drive, which I don't really need, and I was going to buy myself a coffee. Is that grossly insensitive to sit there and maybe even like make a social media post about how my day's going and my situation and the situation that I'm in, which is actually pretty bad, you know? And is it insensitive intentionally? You know, am I trying to kind of like, by showing any self-interest at the moment or interest in kind of the archetype of ego or image, or like, you know, like wearing these fucking glasses while I'm making a video. It's not that sunny outside, I just wear them because I wear them all the time. There's no real reason why I wear these glasses. It's just a kind of, so many people are starving, and if you don't look at, if you can't not have seen the images of starving children, and if that doesn't present as tragic and harrowing and urgent in terms of its priority to a human being, they've got something severely wrong with them. And it's like, if you fully accept the situation and you are in full realization, which I don't think any of us are, because we haven't seen it or heard it. It's just something that we've been sort of told, but in a way, you haven't even really been told. You've just, you know, and we're sort of not supposed to act like we care about it either. Like, that's been prescribed as something which is, you know, under now terrorism laws, that we have to kind of not be out in the street protesting. And it's like, they're sort of saying some voices, you know, have said everybody should be out in the streets, emailing their MP. Every social media post they make should be about Gaza. You know, it's the only thing. If you're, you know, fucking hashtagging your decaf soya chai latte while you fucking sit and enjoy, you know, a meal. Like, I feel guilty eating meals, you know, I feel guilty doing anything really, but I don't feel that guilty because I don't really think that I've got full responsibility for the war in Gaza. You know, I don't feel that I've got full responsibility. I mean, I don't know who else is to blame. I mean, Britain, we made it, didn't we? You know, we made Israel, you know, and the police that are trying to stop the protesters, you can sort of tell. I mean, as well, I watched this woman getting dragged away yesterday, and she was being filmed, and the police kind of stopped to allow her to finish what she was saying. They were like, they had her in, you know, in a reasonable use of force, and they sort of stopped so that she could finish her piece to camera, and then put her in the back of the van. And I just, you know, people, all of us could go out and sell our phone and just have slightly worse phone and use the extra 132 quid that we've gained, you know, to send to aid in Gaza, which they're not letting in anyway. Do you know what I mean? I've given money to charity, you know, to try and help supply food in Gaza, and I've done that like a few times over the last few months, and I've made posts about all sorts of things, including my own situation, you know, my own, you know, you can't, they say charity starts at home, but like, so do our own priorities. You know, we care more about our own, you know, self-importance and self-existence than we do other people's primarily. But there's a lot of very selfless people who are putting themselves and their freedom, their lives at risk to try and help these poor, destitute, hungry people. And they're not being intentionally insensitive by taking a picture of their dinner at a restaurant. Like, how many dinner photos have been uploaded in London, you know, over the last 24 hours to Instagram? You know, how many people have used the food mode on their phone cameras to take a picture of their, you know, vegan dinner and uploaded it to the internet? You know, how many people have, you know, just taken a selfie of themselves looking healthy and well and alive? Is that you know, intentional gross insensitivity? I don't think it is. I think if you asked any of them, you know, what they thought about the situation, they would tell you, and they would, you know, how they felt, and how they felt would probably be accurate. But you just never really can account for the way that the human brain works. Do you know what I mean? It's not, people aren't trying to kind of like deride or, you know, delegitimize a harrowing situation by daring to have a life. And when they say, you know, I'm hungry, I'd like some food, and they go and make some food. Like, I sit in here on my phone, you know, and I spend a lot of time in my room, and, you know, I look at pictures of starving people, and then they come and knock on my door and say, it's time for tea now. And I sit and eat my tea, and it's like, I just don't know who or what kind of philosophy or ideology or attitude one can adopt, you know, or sort of paraphrase, reframe, you know, without using the wrong words, without using the wrong kind of vernacular, without having the wrong type of thoughts about a situation. How is it possible that anybody could not prioritize the most important thing, which is this, you know, in Sudan as well? Like, Sudan isn't getting anywhere near as much kind of focus as what's going on in Gaza. Not in my algorithm, it's not anyway. But in Sudan, it's really fucked. You know what I mean? It really is. And there's only so much that, you know, people like the United Nations, you know, I don't really know much about military history. My opinion is that things weren't actually that cushy after the Second World War. And it's not about being insensitive towards veterans, but I don't think that the Second World War, in terms of its cumulative financial impact and its consequent and successive progression of finance, really made too much of a difference in terms of like the autonomy of nations to have what you might call freedom. And that, it's a bit like, there's this campaign group, Positive Money, who I used to have a lot to do with, and I still follow their posts. I don't donate to them anymore. I used to be a donor, but it's like the most important political issue is monetary reform. You know, it's like our debt-based fiat currency system is like as important as Gaza in terms of the political landscape, and everybody should be talking about this. Every politician should be talking about it. It's the most, politics is like we all put money into a pot and then we decide the smartest guys to redistribute that wealth in certain ways that are going to benefit what we call a society, and that pot is not stable, you know, and it's the most important thing, you know. But it's like the situation in Gaza, anything that anyone posts on social media that doesn't say please just find a GoFundMe and just give them a tenner, just do that today, and if you can do that, then you might help to save somebody's life. You know, bags of flour cost exorbitant amounts and people are living off of nothing, and they're dying from having lived off nothing. When people are dying, and not only are we not paying attention to it, but we're also living in a state where it's like, you know, where they're providing reconnaissance and logistical assistance and weapons components to this war, and it's like we might not. I haven't got any money at the moment. I ran out of money. I live on a fixed income on universal credit, and my money doesn't always last me towards the end of the month, and you know, a small portion of that's been towards charitable donations, but I probably could have given more, you know. I probably could have done, you know, people could go out and, you know, do so many things to sort of sacrifice their own comfort and well-being for the benefit of others, but they don't. Do you know what I mean? I'm not gonna, like, I really do care, and I think it's fucking tragic, and really, you know, it's not that I don't want to kind of make any kind of amends to my lifestyle, but at the same time, I'm not going to kind of, I don't know, like, it's just a very, you know, there's posts on Twitter that say, like, it's a guy with a clipboard and a meme. It says, don't call yourself pro-Palestinian if you're not going to share our you know, posts. You know what I mean? Just everybody. I filled up my Facebook feed with about 25 stories over the last 3 days, you know, and hopefully some of them will have got some money. Maybe somebody will have seen it and they might have donated, but I don't really have any Facebook friends, don't really have any normal friends either. I live a very insular existence. Since I lost my parents, I basically just became sort of like this person that spends all his time doing investigations and trying to duck and dive attempted murders and sort of extensive fraud, and trying to look out for other people's welfare too. And it's like my situation, you know, I'm in dereliction of duties to other people by my own complicity in staying silent in a situation which is nothing like Gaza. But I think there has been starvation involved. That has been a thing. Like, you know, there has been a risk to life, you know, and a loss of life. In my situation, I'm talking about the things that I preoccupy myself with over and above international relations and conflicts. I have nothing I can really do. I give money to try and supply aid, and the aid isn't even getting through. I saw they airdropped some in the other day, and I thought that was really kind of sad, basically. Like, it was like 25 tons or something, and that just is not going to make any difference to anything, you know. And it just, the way that people what they must think of us, you know, I can't imagine what they must think of us, especially when they go on social media to make themselves another desperate post to ask for assistance. And, you know, sometimes they don't even get it. And if they do get the money, then they've got to go out on some mission to go and try and get a bag of flour. And they might get jacked on the way. Do you know what I mean? Apparently that's happening, like looting is happening, you know. You know, I could go and rob a post office and give the money to Gaza. Why not? You know, why wouldn't I? I'm not going to. I don't think anybody should, you know, pursue that kind of direct action. But it's like the actions of that Palestine action, I don't disagree with their motives for a nanosecond. But I think there are different ways of getting people's attention. I wouldn't have necessarily done things in the same way that they did if I was a part of that campaign group. But that's, you know, kind of irrelevant. I just wonder if anyone can tell me how, without meaning to be insensitive, we can continue to live our lives. How is it that being in a country that enshrines free speech and provides us with a welfare state and free healthcare and education, how is it that we aren't in dereliction of the apportionment of those freedoms by not utterly devoting our time and energy to the people who've suffered to provide for that? They are, you know, at the moment it's costing us money, this war. But I expect on some level they're profiting out of it too. And that's what makes things hard. And there are people who are still in the pro-Israel camps, you know, being grossly insensitive, you know, and having an attitude, holding attitudes that don't support the concept of an end to the hostilities, that people that are still sort of trapped in this morally myopic zone where they don't care, and they're continuing to facilitate the atrocities that are going on. I don't know who, like, there must be a small group of people in Israel that have a meeting like every day or every other day and continue to keep, if anyone's seen there's like loads of food, loads and loads of food, water waiting to be delivered, and it's all just sat there with lorries and all this shit, and there's just no way to get it in. They're not allowing it in. People who are fishing are being shot dead fishing in the sea by the Israeli Navy because they don't want them to be able to get themselves any food, you know. And if you're not talking about that and you're not preoccupied with that, then you're in dereliction of duties as a human being. But where's the metric for that? Like, how much is should I just go on Twitter and just spend all day sharing posts to my fucking, I've got about 150 Twitter followers, you know. I don't know how many of them are bots. You know, I've got a blue tick, but I don't have an audience, do you know what I mean? I haven't really got a platform there. Like, it's just kind of futile. I'd be better off spending my time doing something else. It's not that I don't care, and it's not that I don't think that it's anything other than utterly tragic. But it's like, I'll probably make a video today or tomorrow about my situation, because it's really severe, it's really serious, and it's really, really, really scary, and it's tragic and harrowing, and I don't know the best way out. I'm not quite as mentally ill as I was a few months back, and the people that I met during my time in the ward, I have kind of gelled with. They've all got their own trauma and their own story, and they've sort of shared that with me to some extent. And that's been really difficult, because sometimes people's experiences are kind of just as bad, if not worse, as your own. And you don't really know, you know, how to, you have to sort of manufacture compassion for somebody that you don't know from a bar of soap, somebody that you don't know from a fucking, you know, and probably somebody who has got all their own faults and failings that you know nothing about. You know, somebody that, you know, you might not like if you knew why they were in hospital. I mean, sometimes people do all sorts of things, and that doesn't play a part in the fact that there's an absence of compassion or tact or remorse, or, you know, what goes through my head when I think about other people doesn't really represent what I feel, you know, which is maybe a part of my schizoaffective disorder. But I just don't know how emotions, empathy, and what's just really all coalesce. And I don't expect anyone's going to be able to tell me the answer to that question on this bright Monday morning at Cygnic Lodge in Kew Stoke. But I just feel I'm not the only one, I don't expect, who has the same opinions of people like me. I've got a pretty poor opinion of myself for not having done more, you know, but I have done what I could, and, you know, there's only so much that we can control. And I think for other people who are feeling like that, there are going to be other people who feel just the same way, you know, that they feel like they should be at a protest, but they're at work trying to earn themselves money because they've got to keep a roof over their head. They're trying to, you know, get some dopamine and a release of, you know, they're reading a book, they're watching a film, they're eating a meal, while people that our tax money is paying for are suffering immeasurably. And they're sitting and looking at that on their phones and then having a coffee. And I think everyone must be feeling this way, regardless of whether you've shared loads of videos and telling, you know, please just support a GoFundMe, just give some money to some people in Gaza so that they can eat and so that their children can survive. But how much difference any of it's going to make is not relevant, you know. The worry about it maybe not being enough is, you know, I don't think people do the kind of the role of sort of maximum dedication and devotion by inert instinct, and they don't do it when it's enforced either. You know, we're all kind of, we care, but we only care up to a point, and it looks like we're being insensitive, or is anybody, if you go and look on Instagram and you look at kind of food, type in food and look at the most recent images of everybody that's taken a picture of the meal that they're eating, how is every one of those people a cunt? I don't know. I don't think so. I think they're just living their lives as kind of free-thinking, independent people, and but it is really all those people. Every single one of them could have skipped that meal and given the money to Gaza, couldn't they? And if they haven't, someone's going to tell them that they should have done. You can't really argue with that, premise. It's not wrong, but it is a kind of an extremist compassion that some people expect other people to have. And I just think there's probably a lot of people feeling the same way as me, that they're powerless to change a situation. They wish they could go back and undo, the crimes of others and change the course of history. But they can't. I can't. I wish I could, but I can't. And saying to the people of Gaza that, I'm sorry that I haven't done more, wouldn't make them feel any better for a second. It would probably make them feel insulted, and it, because they're going to say, well, you could have done more, and you should have done more. And, so has everyone else in your country. Like, there's so many people involved in this mass sort of absolvance of care and responsibility. And like, how do you factor those people, like the people that are in the pro-Israeli camps? Justice to Israeli independence and the Jewish community, fair play to them. Loads of Jewish community are out, protesting against the war, and saying that it contradicts Judaism, and it's not, I'm not going to get into the kind of links, differentiation between Zionist Jewish Judaism and Orthodox Judaism, but both of those different demographics have been protesting to try and stop what's going on. And clearly, it's like the people I met in hospital, there was like, you can tell from their micro expressions and the intonation in their voice, the nuance in what they say, the way they carry themselves, their body language, pay close attention, and you can tell that people are feeling uneasy. They don't feel happy with what's the situation they're in. They don't feel all right with it, and that's palpable. And I'm talking about mental health patients. I suppose they're all going to have their own sets of problems. Some of them are far worse than others, but it's not that I don't notice these things in people's emotional makeup, or that I forget about them, or that I don't care about them. I mean, how much do you care for somebody you've never met? And once you do meet them, I guess that you do care for them. I've got 2 faders on my mixer, what sort of trust and respect. I kind of respect everybody 100% when I first meet them, but I don't trust anybody at all. I don't always believe everything that everybody has to say when I first meet them, and that's a good attitude to have. But I'll always respect them. You meet a little old lady, you respect them. Do you know what I mean? You just treat them with respect. You don't. Anyway, it's a 30-minute video now. Is anyone else having problems with feeling that they're not doing enough to help in Palestine? If you are, leave a comment and tell me why it's okay to not utterly devote your life to this cause at the moment, because I don't think I'm going to. And if I'm not going to, then why is that?